It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Pure Performance. As always, I'm host number one, Brian Wilson, and host number two is my good pal, Andy Grabner. Andy, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well, Brian. I know that you're full of songs today. You're very, yeah. So it seems we're all in a good mood. Or at least you're definitely in a good mood. I'm in a good mood too, for multiple reasons. Mm-hmm. First of all, the thermometer is above freezing, which is a great thing for early May when we are recording. Also, we had a phenomenal first visual podcast yesterday, the two of us.
Oh, yes, we did.
When we recorded a performance clinic on a topic that is dear to your heart, which is performance monitoring of
Salesforce Commerce Cloud, formerly Demandware. Yes, that was a good one. I enjoyed that very much. Thank you for having me on that.
You're welcome. Sharing our knowledge, not only in an audio way, but also visual, proving that our faces are better for audio only, but still we showed it to the world. And today we actually have a guest on the line.
We do? We never have guests. Oh, before you go there, I just got to say, it did snow a little today in Denver. It's not normally a cold place, but our temperatures have dipped the last week anyhow. So you have your nice warm weather. I've got rain and snow. But it's not getting me down. Anyway, we have a great guest today. Go on, Andy.
We have a great guest today. So Todd and I, we've known each other virtually for quite a bit, and probably Todd can fill us in if he remembers when we first virtually met, but we physically met last year at Impact, I believe, in sunny California. And we've been, I think we're all in the same industry, right? We're all performance engineers. And what I was really intrigued with Todd gave a presentation. He's doing a lot of presentations out there. He also wrote a book, Effective Performance Engineering, which I'm sure he can probably talk even more about it. So Todd, without further ado, I hope you're with us on the line, and maybe you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself. And if you remember when we first met, I don't really remember anymore, but it's been a while.
Yeah, thank you, Andy and Brian, for the introduction and opportunity. Andy, I cannot honestly remember. I think it's got to be the better part of 10 or 15 years that at least we've been working within the same area and the same community. And again, we kind of virtually say hello to each other through all of our social media and blogging and supporting everything that we're all doing. So again, I think one of the fun things about this community is how small it really is, but having the opportunity now to speak with Brian and Andy and of course everybody who's listening in on the podcast is great. And yes, Andy, you and I, we were out at the CMG Impact. I believe it was in La Jolla, California, this past summer. And again, as we're talking about weather, just absolutely gorgeous there, I think, every time that I've been there. So looking forward to, I think the next one might be coming up in New Orleans, which I've got to get ready for that. But back to the topic. So, Andy, I think you kind of said, hey, maybe there would be some interesting topics. I was fortunate enough to be able to co-author the book of Effective Performance Engineering with O'Reilly. So again, a lot of information that many of us in the industry have said, hey, wouldn't it be great if somebody would throw a couple of these ideas down into a book so that we could get it out there for education and a little bit of knowledge sharing and enabling other people to be able to spread the word around. So Shane Evans and myself finally were the two guys that kind of sat down and put pen to paper. That's out there. It's available. It's available free as an electronic download in 3 different formats. You can either get it off of effectiveperformanceengineering.com and then just click on get the book, or you go directly to O'Reilly.com and you can find the electronic download there as well. So again, just getting knowledge out, sharing ideas, always looking to get feedback as well of other tips and tricks that you guys are using.
Perfect. Hey, and I know when we discussed about what should be the kind of main theme today, we bounced around some ideas. Obviously, some of the hot topics came up, like DevOps, integrating functional performance and security. I believe that's what you brought up into the DevOps best practices. And I think this is some of the parts we actually want to talk about. Obviously, we've all been in the performance industry. We actually on the podcast have talked a lot about how we can integrate, especially performance into the pipeline through automated tests, earlier shifting left. You additionally brought up two terms, functional and security, which I think are very interesting aspects that obviously are as equally important. And maybe I want to actually just hand it over to you and kind of give us a little overview and kind of how you start the discussion around how can we actually bake all of these important things into DevOps, and what does this actually mean, and what are some of the best practices that you write about in your book, but also teach in your classes, discuss with your clients.
Yeah. So it's been interesting because, we all have a journey, and through my journey over the last 11 or 12 years, starting at ING Direct, where we were transforming from a waterfall organization into an agile organization, and ultimately drove to DevOps before it was even being called DevOps. Then to do that 3 or 4 more times in my career, then again, a number of fun things happening to where I had the opportunity to land at Hewlett Packard Enterprise through an acquisition of Shunner Software into this chief technology evangelist role, where I had the opportunity to travel the globe, meet with CIOs on down, and helping them to really understand how is it they could leverage certain things. So this topic of being able to deliver amazing results to your business with proven DevOps practices was kind of at the forefront of many of those conversations in many large and mid-sized companies around the world. So as I was trying to shape this into how do we cover some of these important topics in a podcast today, I often went back to, why is this important to the customers that I was speaking with, some of the prospects, and again, how do they look at these different types of things? So again, I don't really care if you're waterfall, you're agile, you're practicing some DevOps practices or throw in whatever other buzzwords. But today, what I'm finding, Andy, is many organizations are looking kind of 5 different areas, or it's also been called the 5 S's. So things like speed, stability, scalability, savings, and of course, security. So that's why I think this topic has become so important. Now that we've got proven DevOps practices, the challenge becomes, well, how do you integrate that into your automated workflow or your automated CI/CD? And when we talk about it, yes, the 3 of us on the podcast here have been focusing a lot on performance, but security is something that has continued to become more and more important over the years, and of course, functional has always played an important role. So again, really thinking about that piece of functional performance and security. How do you automate that into your proven DevOps practices? But again, as I've looked at the landscape, as I've had the conversations, those 5 S's of speed, stability, scalability, savings, and security are the real focus areas at the business level and that C-level conversation.
And Todd, I just wanted to, before we go further, I wanted to, you bring up security, right? And it's really really gaining a lot of momentum these days, right? But I think security in general is kind of a vague term for a lot of people because it's new to a lot of people. So before going on and without getting into how you bake it in, could you just provide maybe a very high level view of what is security in terms of, in context of all this, and what do people have to look out in terms of what that security piece means?
And Brian, it's a great question. I'm glad you stopped me here because security, again, I'm chatting with one of my buddies the other day. He's a cybersecurity specialist. So again, as he thinks about security, it's more of, the bad guys trying to come in and attack your organization or your applications or just getting your customers' data. a security operations person, maybe you're sitting in a network operations center and you're watching all these pieces, you're managing the ways that people are trying to, penetrate your organization or your applications. The third area, which is probably where most of us have spent the majority of our time, is in application performance. So how is it that, whether it's through dynamic or static code analysis or some of the older things that have now come back, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, all these different elements of application security. So I think for this conversation, we could probably just look at application security and those aspects. But I think there's another element here that is playing more and more of a role in the world, and things like DNS. So where is your DNS? Who is your DNS? Some of those risk areas. We could also kind of talk about that a little bit, perhaps, Brian.
Okay, thank you. Andy, you were about to ask a question before I rudely cut you off.
Yeah, so no. You didn't cut me off. You brought up a very good point. I wanted to ask one more thing about one of the other 5 S's. You talked about savings. Could you elaborate more what you mean with savings? Is this time savings, or is this probably more speed then? What's the savings experts? How can we save, or what do you save in the end?
So there are many different facets of savings in organizations that I've been working with, and now I have the opportunity to work myself. It's really focusing on that customer value around cheaper. So this might be things like eliminating some of the legacy middleware costs. It may be reducing infrastructure or consolidating infrastructure or components. So I know that some of the opportunities I've had to work with very large companies. Again, if you think about the ability to optimize an application, you actually will reduce the hardware footprint required to support that application and what it functions for your customers. So there's some stories that we could go in and tell, but it's been pretty substantial savings when you look at some very large companies. And if you can optimize it by 20%, what does that mean as far as being able to realize a savings in eliminating, again, a couple of factors people typically look at is legacy middleware costs and also some of the infrastructure consolidation pieces.
Yeah, and also I guess savings, if you think about modern virtualization and cloud technologies, I assume most of the clients that you have also been working with, they have traditionally provisioned a lot of physical hardware just to have enough hardware for the peak load. But then most of the time, this hardware sits idle because who is using the software on the weekend or middle of the night? And that's at least where we see a lot of people moving towards a more flexible infrastructure as a service offering, because you just pay for the infrastructure when you really need it. And if you don't need it 90% of the time, then you don't want to pay for it. And I think that's also a great way of, obviously, in the end, saving. It's a great it's a great pro point, like a good point, good argument for moving towards some type of cloud offering, whether it's public cloud or something more private. I think that's great. But I just wanted to talk about savings. I was intrigued what you mean with savings, but fully understand.
Absolutely.
Now, you said security. You brought DNS up. What's up with that? Any particular example that you want to talk about?
There's a pretty specific example that I could bring up, Andy, and I don't know if it's too close to home, but I guess what I've always found in working with many organizations is the more specific and close to home or real you can make it, probably the better. And again, I was on a flight back from London the day that this happened, but in the latter part of October in 2016, so not but a few months ago, there was a massive attack that came via IoT devices. So these are things like microwaves and refrigerators that were leveraged to attack the DIN or DINE DNS provider. And again, seemingly a big deal, but maybe not a huge deal. One of the articles that I had read was on Wired, and so again, with Wired, they referenced Reddit, the New York Times, all of these media outlets being engaged because this specific DDoS or distributed denial of service attack took down a pretty significant chunk of the internet for most of the eastern United States. And this was the majority of the day. So a fairly substantial impact there.
Yeah, I believe we all remember that because I think Dyn or Dyn, they are located, as you said, on the East Coast. I think New Hampshire. That's where their home base is, and many websites, including Dynatrace, we also use them. And I remember we felt the impact as well, or actually our customers felt the impact.
Well, I felt it too, Andy, because I was trying to get on our community to look stuff up, and I was like, why can't I get on our community site?
Yeah, and I know, and I think the reason obviously was because our login service. I remember that because we analyzed user sessions. We actually, I think, wrote a blog about it, how we could use PureWave technology to actually prove or see where our own system actually failed when people tried to log in, like you, Brian, trying to log in. Yeah. Or customers trying to log into our synthetic portal or to a Dynatrace SaaS portal then failed because we could no longer resolve the backend authentication system, and then we failed. Yeah. And again, it actually had a very interesting ripple effect because the way it was implemented, and I need to look up the blog post again, but our strategy then was to just keep retrying, and then we were basically blocking a lot of threads, and then basically the whole system just came to a crawl because those requests that couldn't get through the backend system just kept trying and kept spawning up more threads, and basically eventually crashing out or slowing down other parts of our system too that were not directly impacted by it, but indirectly. And that's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, so again, it's an interesting story. Again, it helps you to start thinking a little bit more about, the resiliency of your systems, dependency on third parties. Again, who is your DNS provider? Are there designs that you might want to change then to think about local caching at a web server level? Again, a lot of these questions that as we start revisiting this topic of how do we deliver amazing results to your business with proven DevOps practices, and specifically being able to automate and integrate in functional performance and security. Again, how would you be able to recreate that scenario in your environment today and automate it with every single build? Again, it's just something to think about. But again, it was a very real example that happened fairly recently, and I know it was something that Dynatrace felt the impact of as well.
Now, just on a side note on that, with that DNS specific example, and we don't need to go deep into this, but at a high level, what would be a solution to that? Would it be something like having a backup DNS service that you can switch to in another location? Is it something like kind of that simple, or what does somebody do if this is the situation? What are some of those options?
So there's definitely other DNS providers that are out there. There's you could think about it. You could just switch
over, right? You could just switch over, yeah.
And again, some service providers today already offer that for you. So you have that higher HA or resiliency to, if one of your DNS providers were to be attacked. Because again, the way that we're seeing things evolving today, it's not a matter of if you're going to have a challenge like that. It's just when it's going to happen. And given the fact of IoT and the way that these attacks continue to happen, it's going to happen to you. But thinking about that from a resiliency is something you can do today. And Brian, to your point, there are options that are out there for you to consider.
I'm sure most people were like, well, that's not going to, what's the likelihood of that happening, right? So they went for the other option.
That brings up another question. So now, Todd, do you have, as part of your best practices, a catalog of things that people, like a high priority, medium priority, like this is what you have to have in your pipeline in terms of security checks, in terms of resilient checks, in terms of functional checks, in terms of how does the system correctly fail over? Do you have a catalog, or is there something out there that is, I would assume, also kind of dynamically growing? Because as we are, the world is maturing, and unfortunately, also the bad guys are getting more sophisticated and come up with new ideas. So is there somehow a list available, best practice list of things like this is what we need to have in our pipeline in our DevOps best practices, and kind of revisiting that list about new things that we learn along the way?
So it's interesting. To date, there's been nothing published around you should absolutely check these 5 things. That might be an interesting follow-on podcast, Andy. Because I think I know there are practices that many organizations have adopted after, learning in these ways. But I'm not aware of one thing that's published today that, here's your checklist of items that for all your major feature functions should be checked. One of the practices that I see adopted often is that's handled within these scripts. So again, as an organization is defining what are those very quick functional performance and security scripts that they would want to have run against every single build, they would be building those conditions in. But again, that's often very much tailored to a specific product or a specific business unit, often not kind of that standard library that you're suggesting, which I think would be a pretty valuable piece of information to at least share with the broader community.
And I find it interesting too, because you mentioned having this playbook, and earlier you mentioned when this DNS attack happened, or the DDoS happened, you were flying, and it sounds almost parallel to what the TSA is trying to cope with, right? There's the idea of different kinds of attacks coming in, and now we can adjust our protocol, or in this case, build in different security checks for what we know of is happening. It sounds like, though, that the bigger challenge is predicting what might be next and trying to figure out some security testing models for things you haven't yet anticipated, or, it's very much like, national security in very much the same way, except all just in bits and bytes, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
All right. So I assume so. Now, this was a very specific example on the DNS, baking security in. You mentioned a lot of, functional checks as well. Are you talking here about the classical, functional testing, that we need to bake this into the pipeline in an automated way, running as many functional tests as possible per build? Or is there anything else outside of what people normally know about functional when they hear functional testing or functional checks? Is there anything new out there from a functional perspective that people need to know about?
So specifically what I've seen done, so there's the classic functional automation piece, and you go ahead and ask people, how long does it take for your functional test library to run? Typically it's hours. Not something that could be run in minutes. So part of, again, as you think about, this proven DevOps practice of building in and automating functional performance and security at each build is you want those to run in a very short period of time. Typically less than 15 minutes is kind of a tolerance that many organizations have considered and adopted. So again, when you think about from a functional perspective, and the security and the performance bits, it's what are those most critical elements that if these pieces do not work, we are not going to be able to drive revenue. We are not going to, be within our regulatory requirements. So really skinnying down, what are those pieces that we absolutely need to make sure that they're working at every single build, or at least if they're not working, we would want to know about it as a measurement of quality.
Yeah. So and this is interesting, I want to get your thoughts on this. We, as Dynatrace, we obviously also have an engineering organization that is actually building our software, and we did the same thing. So what we learned when we moved from our monolithic code base to a more service-oriented cloud-native environment, we came to the same conclusion that our build times are too long. It takes too long to get feedback. If a developer checks in code and it takes hours for him to get feedback, then he may checks in code, walks home, and while he's home, we realize he just broke the build, but it's impacting all the others that are either still in the office or that are working in different time zones. So we did the same thing. We tried to bring down build times by obviously different means, breaking up the large code base into smaller components that could be independently tested. But what I thought was also interesting is we came up, I think, with a 10-minute rule saying that every team, every feature team, application team needs to figure out which tests need to be run within the first 10 minutes so that they get good feedback fast about the quality status of the code change they just made. Because anything that takes longer than 10 minutes it just takes too long, it's out of your mind, and then it's like, it just, you need immediate feedback, but it still needs to be quality feedback. And so what we learned, and maybe you have some additional thoughts on this, what we did and learned, we optimized our builds. We invested a lot in parallel test execution so that we can execute even more tests in shorter time, but eventually give the decisions to our application teams, to our development teams, to say which tests need to be executed in the first 10 minutes, because they should know best, because they're also in the end responsible for then saying this is good enough and we can ship it to the next stage in the pipeline. Now, do you have any other suggestions, anything else that you teach out there or that you've seen?
Absolutely, and there's a number of different areas, Andy, that we could go, but I'm encouraged that that same 15 minutes, 10 minutes, again, that's for all the reasons that you just suggested. That is absolutely why it's how do you skinny it down to that small piece. I guess there is something else that I've highlighted quite a bit through the last 12 or so years of my career. One of these is as you think about everything that you're driving through, and I actually covered this on page 40 in the book as an illustration, is talking about quality gates. And I think this speaks to a bit of what you were just suggesting. I know that Dynatrace often highlights the UFO model as well, but again, it's just another way of having an information radiator to be able to visually show for the teams, for the leaders, for other key stakeholders, this is the status of these different pieces as we're going through the different stages or quality gates. And it's funny, I remember back to many years ago when we used to have the entry and exit criteria or acceptance criteria in every one of the stages through a waterfall model. But now that we're automating everything through, from a developer's desktop into a BBT or a build validation test environment, and then however many, dev environments, QA environments, pre-production environments, you probably have a lot more than that as well. But each one of those automated tests, each one of those feedback cycles that you get, how is it that you're measuring those quality gates? Are you able to then automate the pass or fail across each one of those components within the quality gates, again, whether it's functional, security, or performance? But that's kind of the next piece that, as you're sharing with your Dynatrace engineering team and some of the practices they've adopted, again, taking it down to the next bit of, can you actually automate it so that all of this is passing or failing? And once you get to that, here is a good quality build with, again, very, very short cycle times, that by the time somebody's finally looking at it or seeing it, that you at least have a level of quality that's acceptable based on what the team has assigned to as far as quality.
Mm-hmm. Now, coming back quickly to security here, what do you see? Do you see our larger organizations or also small and medium organizations having dedicated security teams, and then they work with the engineering teams, with the people that are responsible for test automation and the pipeline, into baking their security checks into the pipeline? Or is it more the security teams start providing security as a service, kind of like security checks as a service, providing APIs, so that whoever builds the pipeline and runs tests in the pipeline can just reach out to these services? Can you give any insights on that? How we bake security in?
Yeah, so most of the security piece has been taken on by the development teams. So again, cross-functional, BAs, QA, dev, the Scrum Masters, depending on, again, what flavor of what you're running. But typically that's taken on within the development team. Many of the security tools today already offer open APIs. So being able to set that up within your automated build environment, and having access to be able to call that API to then execute these tests and deliver you your results. Again, the other piece that'll come, I'm sure, Andy, you're already thinking here, is being able to store those results in some other folder system, because again, as you're automatically bringing up these various development or test environments, you're also going to deprecate them. So you would not want to have that located on those machines, again, whether they be virtualized machines, whether they be containers, however you are architecting your dev and test environments. Same exact example, just store all the results over on a folder or file share so that, again, whatever you're doing to bring that up and illustrate it within your information radiator can go and pull those results from that file system to then display it. But again, most of this is already being adopted by the development teams in that manner. Again, many of the tools today already have APIs openly available.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then I assume also when you talk about taking these results and then displaying them, I mean a perfect example or a perfect location for that would be like a build server, like a Jenkins, where you are collecting all of your results, where you actually execute your pipeline, and then you have your quality gates, and then your Jenkins, your Bamboo, whatever build server you have also keeps track of the build artifacts, which includes the quality metrics of every stage in the pipeline.
Yes. Yeah. And again, Jenkins is one way you could do it. There's a number of other tools. Again, I find every organization maybe has a little bit different way of doing it, but you're absolutely right. Something like Jenkins would be easy to illustrate it in. There's plenty of dashboards out of the box with them that you could leverage. There's many other tools out there today that many teams already have in their environment. It's just thinking about, oh, right, we could do this. How would we adopt that and then be able to deliver these types of results? The other important part, though, that I've learned, Andy, through this is making sure that's visualized outside of just your development team. How is it that, and this is a whole nother topic as well, is, building in that culture where looking at the build at that frequency and helping people to understand, why is that build important? Why is the quality of that important? And I think the other piece is, as we opened up with those 5 S's, who's not interested in speed or stability or scalability or savings and security. So there's always that piece of the culture of the organization, and how is it that now we can execute these tests, now we can get this level of frequency, we can see quality, but why is that important to some of your senior stakeholders?
Yeah.
Well, because I guess in the underlying, as you said, in the end, it impacts the bottom line, which is how happy are our users, do we make money, right? And that's basically, is our system up and running after if we miss a critical security hole, and then somebody brings down our system, and then nobody can spend money with us. Obviously, business cares. So better get the test coverage up. Better make sure you're catching more things earlier.
Yeah,
now,
and even worse with security is if you, if not just bringing it down, but if you get a breach, and then you have to spend all that money on, getting people, what do they call it, the background or the credit watches and all that. Yeah. It could be a very, very costly mistake.
Yeah, also legal fees, I guess. I mean, I'm not that familiar with all of that, but I'm sure there's a lot of cost. I'm not sure if you guys watch Silicon Valley, the show.
I'm still catching up on it, but I've gotten I think first 1.5 seasons or something.
Yeah,
season 3.
I feel like they've lived part of my life just watching this show.
Yeah. Did you watch the latest episode last Sunday, by any chance?
I have not. I think I'm caught up to, was it season 5, 6, something like that. Okay, I did not see it this past Sunday.
Okay, then I'm not spoiling it, but it's basically in the same direction. Legal fees and stuff like that. Anyway, so Todd, we talked a lot about one topic that I believe, at least we use the term shifting left quality, shifting left performance, shifting left security, baking it automatically into the pipeline, and that's all great. But obviously we unfortunately cannot find everything in pre-prod. What suggestions do you have and best practices, if you can name maybe your 1 or 2 top ones, in terms of closing the feedback loop in production? Because some certain things can only be seen in production, because this is also the real environment with the real users out there, and then having real impact of evil people that are out there and trying to poke holes. Any things here to kind of close the cycle, close the feedback loop?
I think there's 2 pieces that I would highlight here, and maybe some of this, is kind of ringing Brian's bell a little bit. But it's and again, if we're going to call shifting left what we just spoke about, it's also how do you shift right? So how is it that you can bring the same monitoring that you have in production into all of your pre-production environments, and that way being able to see those results of, okay, I've just moved this release to production. I want to be able to see how that's performing, how it's functioning, how it's from a security perspective, what are my end users doing, and how is the system as a result being impacted, but also is there a way that I can see that or recreate that in my pre-production environments? So I think that might be one area just from a monitoring perspective that I've often seen as not a common practice, but as soon as you start doing it, you start seeing some interesting insights. Some very, very large production systems, not always are organizations able to have like or same scale pre-production environments as they have in production. And some people will more or less assume a fairly linear extrapolation percentage as they're in their pre-production environments. So again, another benefit or value coming out of this shift right monitoring, being able to do both production and pre-production environment monitoring, is you can start to see some of those bits. There's a second one that I'd also want to jump in on, which is making sure you're just measuring some very basic metrics. One of those is the percentage of commit done by each of those teams, and again, that's measured as a percentage based on the stories they commit to for that specific sprint. Another one is number of production incidents. So as far as the old measurements on defect density and things like that, I don't think that's as much value for many organizations as just focusing on the production incidents that have been the result of a release or sprint from a specific team. So being able to tie that accountability and ownership and again, enabling the teams to then figure out, hey, why is it that this happened in production? Why did we not see it pre-production? And what are some things that we could do to change now so that we don't have that in the future? So again, those two pieces are probably other items that I would highlight given your question there.
Yeah, that's really amazing, because you're talking about now not just monitoring the applications, but monitoring, maybe lack of a better word, monitoring the pipeline or monitoring the release process and collecting metrics on the releases themselves, not just application and hardware and process metrics, but tracking those actual release metrics. That's a new idea to me. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and I like the two metrics. Just to recite, you said the first metric was the percentage of stories or commits based on the stories they committed to, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and the second one was the number of incidents in production.
Right, not necessarily bugs, but incidents, right? So you might have a bug where, okay, the text field, didn't have a limit, something silly and insignificant like that. Who cares about that? But when you actually have a production incident, that's a much better metric, I think. And that kind of ties into a lot of what we talk about, right? Because a lot of it is, are you monitoring the proper metrics, right? So that concept of the production incidents, I think, is a much more mature way of looking at it, so that you don't get clouded by all the little minor things that might not really matter so much.
And it's a great quality metric that also I think is easy understandable to business, because if we have certain amount of incidents, I can probably also correlate that to how many man hours did I spend to work on these incidents, whether it's in first level support, second level support, or in engineering, and also what was the impact to the customer. And I think this is a great way to correlate business metrics or business answers with the quality that comes in from the pipeline. And then if we know, hey, in the last 3 months with every release, we saw an increase in production incidents and an increase in customer impact, and we know exactly which features it actually from where it came from, then I can make an investment and say, well, now it's about time to fix this because the trend is alarming, and we need to work on that.
Yeah, and on a related note, if I can switch a teeny bit here, Todd, I was reading one of your entries on TechBeacon. By the way, is TechBeacon yours, or do you write a lot for that?
So I was one of the co-founders of
Okay.
TechBeacon, but TechBeacon is an HPE sponsored website. What's extraordinarily unique about it is you probably saw it's content rich,
Right.
and all of the contributors are practitioners like you and I. So again, what you're getting is pure content. There's no sales involved,
Right.
as you could tell on the site, but it's just wonderful content. And again, I'm a high contributor,
Yeah.
but also one of the original co-founders.
You're not in Denver, right? You said you're
I
a high
am
contributor.
not.
I'm kidding. Okay. So yeah, the reason I brought it up, right? So on techbeacon.com, go check it out if you're listening. It's got a lot of great stuff on it. Because we were talking about shifting right, and one of the articles I was reading, somewhat related, is how to build performance requirements to your user stories, right? And that while I was reading this, I saw a lot of how to put in those performance checkpoints on the card so that you can get it out to production properly. And now we're talking about shifting right into production, which brought my mind to Andy. If you recall, one of our last shows, we were talking with Gorinka Biedov from Facebook. And she had mentioned the idea of creating success measurements before deployment. So Todd, the idea here is you're going to put out a new feature or new code, right? And you're going to introduce it into the production realm. Now, before it goes into production, you as the development team or whoever's requesting this new component in there has to define the success of that component once it gets into production, because it's not just good enough to push it out there and say, hey, it ran. It's not falling down. Building in some more metrics like, is it running? How much power is it taking to run, whether it's compute power, memory, whatever, but also success criteria of maybe how many people are using that. And that then becomes a feedback loop to bring back to the left of where do we make improvements? How do we optimize? Is it worth keeping this in there? Even if 1% of the people are using it and it's really running really good, maybe it's just a feature people aren't interested in, and that comes back into some of that savings of, do we pull that code out? Is this something that, I don't know, fits into sort of the areas you're in or you're looking at from that point of view?
It is, Brian, and it's funny that you you referred to techbeacon.com and that specific article of how to build performance into your user stories. This was actually a quite fun story for me to write, and I don't know, maybe we can include a link to it, but
Yeah.
Right to where you're talking about right now was a piece of it. My editor was funny. He goes, Todd, as much as you're telling me about it and I'm reading about it, he said, I need you to actually fill out the cards as somebody would do potentially to go ahead and stick up on the wall with their team. And I said, well, absolutely. So I had to go to the drugstore to go ahead and buy these 3x5 cards and then actually write them and then took pictures of them to include in the article. But what you probably remember seeing in that article are those acceptance criteria, is what I've heard many people call them.
Right.
You would write on the back. So, for example, in that article, the front of it on one of the, I think I used 3 different cards, but one of them was, as an airline passenger, I want to be able to check flight status on my mobile app so that I can make my flight. And I was actually recalling, as I was writing this story, I think I was flying from Philadelphia to LA, and they had to shut down the one plane because of mechanical issues, but then I had to go to a whole nother terminal to be able to try to make this flight, but nobody had the gate number. So I'm sitting here on that mobile app saying, okay, well, where am I going to be? And that's why I said, well, flip the card over, and those acceptance criteria, Brian, that you're referring to, and what I wrote on the back of that card was, must be able to handle 10,000 concurrent users. Users are going to be connecting over a variety of networks, 60% of them on a 4G, 20% on a 2.5G, et cetera, et cetera. Using mobile data encryption to ensure that we have secure data transmissions, also application launch time of 2 seconds or less, and then a screen-to-screen response time of 3 seconds or less. So again, thinking about, right, how is it that you're building this was an example of building performance into your user stories. But as you can hear, I've also think about functional pieces, security pieces. So again, starting early and building that into your process is absolutely critical.
Right. And then I guess the last piece would be like, how do you, like, let's say you deliver all of that, right? Let's say it all gets out there, defining a measure of, all right, now that we delivered it all, are people using it and are people happy? And I think, looking at the concept of the commits done and the production incidents, taking a look at also adding in the measures of, what's the usage of this? Now that we delivered exactly what we said we wanted to deliver and we met our goal, what's the real world usage and response to this? And pulling that back in as a metric, I think, could work really well too.
Well, I'm fascinated about the discussion and actually thought one thing that I think we could talk probably for a much longer time, but I know we don't have more time today, but I would love to come back maybe with another episode and talking more particular about security, because even though we touched base on it, I think this is a topic, and also Brian, as you said, it's a hot topic. We see it more and more,
right? And
it's also our listeners are more interested in that. So I would love to invite you back and talk more about DevSecOps, as they call it, right? How to bake security better into the pipeline. I really want to understand a little bit more about what the best practices are. I mean, you told us a couple of those, but this is an open invitation now for you for a future episode on that. That would be really great.
Excellent. Well, Andy and Brian, I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this podcast, and absolutely look forward to the opportunity to do some more in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, we love that. And then I think, Andy, that could fit into sort of what we're going to do. So just a sneak peek for the users. We have a series of what we're calling, maybe for lack of a better term, but 101 episodes on a lot of different concepts, where we're just going to dive in with some experts on things like
OpenStack, OpenShift.
Yeah, all these other kinds of concepts. And I think the security thing could fit really well into that series. So Todd, if you're saying yes, we're going to hold you to it now because we have it on tape. Well, there's no tape, but we have it on digital bits and bytes. Andy, is there any, or Andy or Todd, I don't know if either one of you want to go first. It looks like we're about wrapping up here. Any kind of last thoughts or concepts you wanted to throw out, or is it summary? Is it time for the summarator?
I want to go Todd. I want to let go Todd first. If you have any summaries.
Well, I guess, as we've talked through a number of these different ideas, and we think about, why is this important, and specifically, what is the impact of not doing some of these things, and coming back to that business conversation, I think increasing revenue is something that comes to mind for many business leaders. How do we attract new customers? How do we retain existing customers? What is the impact of not doing this and having an impact to our brand? So thinking about brand value. Also, is functional performance or security a competitive advantage that your business is looking to take out in the market today? Hopefully the answer is yes to all four of those, but that's one of the reasons why, or four of the reasons why, as I've bumped up against different business leaders, that they say, yeah, this is absolutely important. The second thing and last thing I would want to mention again is just this book, Effective Performance Engineering. It's available for free for a digital download off of Effective Performance Engineering, and when you type that in, just go to get the book and you'll see a very quick and easy download there. Just want to get this information out and share it. I don't make a dime on it, so again, it's out there for the taking and sharing. Hopefully we can all learn a little bit, and let's give some feedback back as to what we learned and what we could do to improve next time.
And we'll have a link to that on the site there, Todd, as well. So hopefully people will download that. Andy, do you want to do the Summinator?
The Summinator. So I love the fact that you're echoing what we've been talking about for a while, which is shifting left, quality, performance, now also security, which we have not really talked about in the past. Shifting right, meaning or pulling. The question is always shifting right or pulling stuff in from the right to the left, meaning looking at production data, but also getting production monitoring information into a pre-prod environments. So these are things we've been talking about because it's very valuable, because it allows you to get more meaningful data about the quality, performance, scalability, and speed. I think all the 5 S's that you had, these are all metrics that we can measure early on and make better decisions on whether we want to promote changes further into the pipeline and what we do with these changes in case they hit production, there's a problem. So I like that, shifting left, shifting right. Security, as I said earlier, thanks for the example. Thanks for reminding us about the Dyn outage that we had and all impacted us, showing us how vulnerable we all are, but not only our own systems, but also the systems that we are depending on. And thanks for giving back to the community through your effective performance engineering book and through all the blogging that you also do. And we'll definitely call you again on doing another episode.
Excellent. Sounds great. Thank you, guys.
And Andy, I just wanted to add one more thing too. And we're talking about, and I want to say these slowly because I want people to really think about them for a minute. Speed and agility, stability, scalability, savings, and security. Right, where we've been talking about those in context of the release cycle or, your different sprints, but also to think about that in whatever role you might be fulfilling, whether or not you're doing functional automation, your developer, architect, performance. Those can apply to your process specifically as well, not just the whole release cycle. There are ways you can bake all of those in to increase the speed and agility of your process. If you recall, Andy, when we were talking to Rick Boyd, and he was talking about delivering kind of performance as a service, they had to figure out how to scale that service to make it more robust and be able to serve all their clients within the company. And you get the savings and stability of all these things. So there's even beyond that. That pipeline of code, it's in the processes that you're running yourself that you can apply these things to on another layer, which is a whole different kind of way of looking at it. But if you think about them, I'm sure anybody can come up with a lot of ways they can imagine how that takes shape. Todd, before we leave, I want to toss back to you. Do you have any appearances or anything besides, we have your book. We've got the web page, which we'll put links on. Are you doing any upcoming performances anytime soon? This will probably be, we're looking maybe, I think this is going to be airing this month. So maybe anything end of May or June, July timeframe?
Most of my stuff you'll either find on LinkedIn or on Twitter. So LinkedIn, of course, you can just look for my name. On Twitter, I am @perfeng. So it's APPPERFENG. But many of the speaking bits that I've been doing lately have been with a variety of organizations, including some of the STAR events, some of the CMP events, some of the some of the O'Reilly events I've been doing as well. So a lot of papers are submitted, but I'm trying to think if there's anything. I've got 2 things in June that are probablys coming up. I've got a security event that I'm doing here locally in Wilmington on the 17th of May, but I'll be out in the Bay Area in June. I'm also going to be in London, I believe, in June. So Again, I would just, if you go out to my LinkedIn profile, my Twitter handle, check out those bits, you'll go ahead and see many of the events that I've got coming up. Excellent.
Andy, do you have anything to promote before we take off here?
Just my personal highlights. Dev1 in Linz, Austria, early June. I think there's still tickets out there, dev1.at. Then DevOps Enterprise Summit in London, early June. And I believe Velocity is coming up end of June. Then also ATIRC, Federal DevOps, where I'm speaking in Washington. And maybe some more, but these are the kind of the highlights that are coming up.
Okay, and I'll be probably making some popcorn in my house this weekend, so that's about all I got. Although I did just do that podcast, but that's in the past now. But yeah, that was awesome. All right, well, unless anyone's got anything else to say, I think we're at a wrap here. Thank you all for listening. We'd love any kind of feedback. Please check out Tech Beacon. It's got a lot of great articles on it. I was starting to look through a bunch of them yesterday. Great stuff there, Todd. And if you have any feedback for us, you can message at pure_DT, or you can always reach Andy at GrabnerAndy on Twitter, and myself is at Emperor Wilson. Love to hear any ideas, feedbacks, or ideas for future shows. And without further ado, then, I'd say we can all say goodbye. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Goodbye.
Bye.
Todd, you missed it.
Goodbye.
There you go. All right. Ciao.
Thanks, guys.